guess, Jason, thank you for giving up your evening on a hot, sunny night when you should probably be sat in the garden drinking beer, having a barbecue. So appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
So I guess, look, this is you're our guinea pig of doing this first of all. So hopefully it'll be slick. It'll be really good. But I guess the premise behind it, I wanted to do it for a little while. But as I've discussed with you, it's kind of, I think the more we could all do collectively to kind of shout about our careers in tech and what that looks like, what it involves, and sort of what career changes can have and what people wanting to get into the industry and the different sort of options they have, I think the better. So we're going to try and have lots of interviews over the coming months with senior people like yourself and just have a bit of a chat, really. Nothing too structured, too formal, but just kind of going over your journey, where you started, why tech, where you got to, and then just sharing some lessons learned and what you might do differently, and advice you give through. So I suppose, mate, everyone don't want to hear from me. So I guess, look, you started back as a grad developer in 2011. University was UE, wasn't it? Games development, I think. And I'm not even doing that from reading your LinkedIn profile. That's just
thank you. No, it actually goes back a bit further than that.
Come on now.
So I know we obviously, one of the subjects you talked about was, career changes, and that's actually what I did. So I originally studied business, going back to 2000. Did a degree in business, and that's kind of where I met my other half. Went back to London afterwards, very much with the intention of going to go back to London. I got a job in banking and finance. Worked there for sort of 4 years, doing a variety of things. A lot of it around kind of relationship management, a little bit on the sales side, and then I guess over sort of 3-4 years, generally found I wasn't really getting the satisfaction out of the job that I was kind of hoping for. Great salary, great benefits, all those things, but you kind of, when every morning you wake up and think, ugh, I've got another, here we go again, another day. And at the time, actually, I had some really good advice from who was our kind of head of corporate finance at the time. And I remember having a kind of, a chat with him over a coffee. And, his advice was kind of work out what you like doing and then work out how to make money doing it. And it really, it's one of those sort of, epiphanies where I went home and I had a long think and thought, what do I enjoy, what things am I kind of really passionate about. And kind of as a teenager, younger guy, I'd always been very into games. Played a lot of games as a kid, and so I thought, what, I like games, I'm going to go and learn how to make games. So I did a foundation diploma. I resigned from my job. I did a foundation diploma in art and design to learn about animation. Spent half my time learning about fine art, which was not really my thing. And then got onto a degree at UE to do games technology, which is basically the games programming degree, focused around more on the technical side. But the idea being that it gave you transferable skills for software development or programming, that if you didn't decide to go in games at the end, you had plenty of skills to then look at any kind of web development role or any software engineering role. Through that sort of degree, I found myself enjoying the programming side a lot more. Games a little bit less. Games are the biggest challenge with games. I think less of an issue now, perhaps, but they were very geographically distributed. Mm-hmm. So it's daddy's got a new job, kids. We're off to Newcastle. When you've got a young family, there's limited options. So came out of uni, graduated, and got myself onto a graduate scheme with a company that was then called Avello, and the rest is history.
So going back, so you were working, had a family then by the signs of it, gave that up to go to university. What did your partner at the time think about that? Because I can imagine that must have been a tough conversation.
Yeah, well, my first child was born in the induction week of my second degree. My second child was born about 3 weeks before my second year exams. All kind of, I wouldn't say planned, because it wouldn't have been a good plan, but we've been together for a long time, so it wasn't sort of a nightmare moment. I spent sort of pretty much university, where a lot of the other guys I'm studying with are off out, going out drinking every night. I was going home and looking after an 18-month-year-old and a newborn, and pretty much had what I would say is 3 of probably the toughest years of my life, which were doing a full-time degree, working at John Lewis to try and help pay the bills, being a stay-at-home dad a couple of days a week, and certainly would not have been possible if it wasn't for the support of my other half, Sharon. So she works in the NHS, kind of psychiatric nurse. So I think she's quite tough. She can.
She can put up with you then.
She's put up with me for almost 20 years now. So she's got to be It'll be fairly tough.
So obviously, I guess you kind of said, and I'm just curious about the degree part, isn't it? Because I think we find a lot of software engineers either come from a computer science or sort of the gaming sort of degree that you did. So did you look at the computer science element, or was it more the gaming element you started off thinking you were enjoying and wanting to pursue?
I was going to say, I think it's games development is quite an interesting domain because it's a really interesting mix of creativity and kind of engineering. Games have like serious engineering challenges, all the sort of trying to model physics and so on is very, very complex. But you also get that kind of option to be really creative, games ideas, how you design games, mechanics, those sort of things. So it was very much from a games perspective that I went into it. That was kind of what I was looking for at the outset. But I would say with any career, it's a journey, and that was part of the journey of me discovering, I do enjoy the games programming, but actually I enjoy more general programming, kind of logic, data, behavior, more so than quaternions and matrix multiplication.
Straight over my head, Jason.
Don't worry, it's the same with me.
And then just before we kind of move into the career part, because I know when we've worked with you, sort of hiring people into your teams and so forth, obviously, especially in Bristol, UWE's got a sort of fairly good gaming course there, so we see a lot of grads coming out with that. But if you had your time again, would you follow that route, or would you look at the computer science route? And what's your view when you're looking to hire grad devs, whether they've come from a gaming route, computer science route, and then one of the other just questions just to throw in there, just so you can fit it into your answer, is one of the things we see, and you've been always really good on this, but a number of people sometimes have slightly different views, is on the universities they come from, sort of whether it be is it a red brick one, and what's your take on all of that stuff for people thinking on which routes to go?
So I would start off by saying, frankly, I don't care what university you came from. It makes absolutely zero difference to me. Some of the best engineers I've worked with have not been university educated or have not done a computer science or a programming degree. Most of the software is languages and constructs are tools, and it's actually learning how to use those tools effectively, which is kind of more problem solving. I've had really great people I've worked with that have come from like a civil engineering background or maths. And with some exception, a lot of modern software development is about teamwork. It's about working with non-technical people, so product people, testers, account managers, support desk. And whilst there is definitely a place for kind of solid technical skills, a lot of it is, not like heavy algorithms. Most of what we do is not Google search algorithm, or, most of it is kind of what I would describe as like line of business applications. So, recording data, updating data, and it's really about how you construct a system that is kind of maintainable, supportable, can scale as the business scales. Less about massively complex algorithms that you might go study at some points of a computer science degree. The other side, I guess, is the trend of modern programming languages is to abstract a lot of that lower level complexity away from the developer, so they don't have to worry about things like memory management and so on. It's more about focusing their time on delivering value back to the business, not making sure that they've reclaimed some memory, because otherwise the memory leak. Does that hopefully I think that's answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's good. Anyway. It's good. Yeah, no, it does. And I think I'm always keen. I think that's where this is, I think, it's going to be really interesting, just to kind of get different people's opinions on that, because I'm sure there's a number of people, and the way the world's going, a lot of kids sort of being encouraged to look at STEM careers, and obviously technology being one of those. But I think there's still such a minefield out there of options to pick from. And I remember when I was kind of that age, you kind of got no idea really what you want to do, have you, or what's the best route. So I think the more we can all talk about different routes and options and what that means, I think it can only be better for everyone, really.
Well, I guess, if I think back at some of the examples of people that, I've hired over the years, I'd say, one of the best people I've hired did maths, didn't do any, did a bit of kind of Fortran, bit of MATLAB, I think, at university, but had not had a solid web development career, had a few months experience somewhere else. And, I guess what you're looking for, particularly at that more junior entry level, is you don't expect them to have solid skills, because they're not going to be sort of battle tested, and what you learn in university or on a boot camp is only a part of the picture. That the transition into modern kind of commercial development is a big shift change from what you'd learn in a classroom. And it's like it's the drive, the determination, the enthusiasm, the energy the kind of desire to just gobble up as much information and opinion as possible, take it really positively, and kind of really be focused on your own personal growth. I think those are the people that are, I would take someone who can demonstrate that over someone with a first-class degree in computer science any day of the week if they didn't have those same attributes.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. And and just before we delve back into you, and because I guess I'm keen as well to kind of explore how you kind of climbed the ladder as you did and ended up where you are. But you just mentioned then one of the things, the boot camp part, because again, that's something we're seeing evolving massively probably over the last 18, 24 months, especially in the Southwest as well. But what's your view on career changes and sort of people coming through those crash courses of some of the I mean, there are some great boot camps in the region, but how do you look at those individuals? What are some of the skills and attributes? Because I guess with a computer science grad, 3 years and maybe a placement as well. So you kind of got someone with 4 years experience, if you'd like, versus somebody who's kind of done a boot camp for 8 weeks. And I guess what do they need to demonstrate? And what do you look for from those individuals coming through?
So frankly, I think it's still the same. The thing that I would hope to have someone coming out of a boot camp with is just a basic language, or a basic understanding of our main programming language that we use in that business. So if we're a .NET shop, a good understanding of C#, be able to write C#, understand it, read it. If you have the right attitude, and I can't emphasize this enough, the technology and the languages and so on, that's stuff that can be taught. It's scientific. If you type A, you get B. It's a bit more complex than that, unfortunately. But otherwise, I know you're thinking of I can do.
I was going to say I could be a software developer.
Exactly.
That sounds easy.
Sort of behavior, personal characteristics are, much harder to change. If you aren't, naturally receptive to constructive feedback, it's a difficult thing or a difficult change to go through. If you're naturally quite introverted and you don't really like communicating a lot with other people, it can be difficult to change that in someone and make them an effective team member. So I'd always start with, if you've got the right behavior, a good basic level of intelligence that you can demonstrate, and you've got the energy and passion that you want to succeed, then you will, and I don't think 3 years in a degree or a boot camp is the differentiating factor there. We've hired some great people from university, but we've also hired some great people from boot camps. We did my current role at Clearbank, we made use of something called a Makers Academy. And again, people doing career changes, and they're all absolute stars. University across the business, we see it as a massive success. They've all grown, pretty much all been promoted within a year. Again, I think because they have that drive, and the drive to make a career change is kind of demonstrate they've got that kind of internal grit to really, make a change rather than just go, look, I'm comfortable where I am. I'm going to continually push myself. I'm going to go through the pain of changing careers because I want something different.
Yeah.
Better myself.
So I guess look, the other thing is I guess I was keen to get out of this was obviously sort of what is the part of people coming into sort of IT and into software engineering different routes. But I think as well, then I think the other part there's lots of value we can talk about are people who sort of 2-3 years into their career that are sort of wanting to grow and develop. And I think obviously, look, you've done really well for yourself, haven't you? You've got some great names on your CV of clients, companies you've worked for. The likes of Hargreaves Lansdown and places like Bud and now Clearbank, and sort of you've progressed through the ranks pretty quickly to the role you're in now as senior tech manager. So I guess I was keen to kind of spend the second half just sort of exploring on sort of how you did that, some of the skills that you sort of think you've developed, picked up, and then maybe looking at a little bit about now as sort of a senior manager in a pretty well-known fintech, what you look for when hiring, and almost sort of looking at your succession planning and sort of what are some of the technical elements, but also then I think some of the softer skills, because I think that's some of the parts that are really important for people to develop, to grow into those senior roles. But I guess I'd be keen to kind of just hear your side on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I'd start with, I went through a fairly sort of standard, career path, sort of graduate developer, junior developer, senior developer. And I think that's a path that most engineers will go on in their career. And then I think you kind of reach that point as a senior engineer of, where do I now want to spend my time and effort? And I think too often, that there's a tendency for them going, right, we've got this really great technical person. He's a fantastic lead developer or a principal engineer. He solves all our really big, complex engineering problems. Let's make him a manager. And often the skills that I think you need to be a good manager or a good kind of technical manager are different to what you need to be a really good engineer. I think having an engineering background is really important, so you can understand the problems and the challenges your engineers face. But equally, the softer side or this kind of people skills are really important as you transition beyond senior developer, whether that be into a team lead, even to some extent an architect. Because it's about being able to bring people with you, convey information, support people, listen. Probably listening is one of the most important things. Rather than that conversation being you sat there thinking, what am I going to say next? It's actually, what is that other person doing, and being able to kind of take a step back. One of my colleagues at the moment, I think he put it very well. I don't know whether he was quoting an article or some of his own wisdom, but his view is, if you want to have good managers and good leaders in a technology organization, you have to give your really good technical people a viable career path, because if that's the only option open to them, that's the path they will go. And I would say certainly over my career, I've worked with a variety of different managers, and some of them are the classic case of a senior engineer, very, very good technically, but didn't really perhaps have the right characteristics to be a manager. Didn't want to be distracted, didn't want to be interrupted, and I think you come to accept that that is your job now. Your job is not to be tunnel vision, with Visual Studio or whatever IDE of choice. It's to be able to bring things together, and it's not about what you do as an individual. It's no longer about your individual contributions. It's about how you enable other people to contribute. Don't try and be that single 10 times developer. Try and make 10 developers 2 times developers. How can you amend process, support them with learning opportunities, whatever it might be, team dynamics that then help them progress and succeed. I think when you asked a question around, kind of my own progression, I think there is probably a certain degree of right place at right time. But I guess alongside that, there is the kind of confidence to just go, what, if I'm going to bet on someone, I'm going to bet on myself. Mm-hmm. And I'll have a crack at anything, kind of 100% confidence, whether that be my own DIY adventures or whether that be sort of taking my first steps into management. And I would say to anyone that if it's something that you're interested in, and I think it's important to pare back the difference between I want to increase my salary and I want to actually go into a management role. And I think you've got to be really, really critical with yourself around, is that actually what I want? Because you do see a lot of it in the industry where people take that step into team lead or engineering manager, and then 2 or 3 years later will take a step back to senior engineer because it actually wasn't what they wanted. And again, I think that comes back to that point I made around the importance of providing your engineers with good career paths. So whether that be from a principal engineer or architect or staff engineers, however that may be, it's recognizing their importance, the value that they bring to your organization, and not trying to pigeonhole into a role that perhaps they don't want to do, they may not be effective at, but have to do it because that's the only way they can progress as individuals.
That makes sense. I think one thing I'd keen to get your opinion on, because being a recruiter, I've probably got my own very biased opinion on this, but when's the right time to move companies? Because one of the things you always talk about people is kind of, I want to get to this role, and I spend a lot of time chatting to people about it, and rightly or wrongly, my advice is, look, if you want a promotion, the easiest and best way to get it is sit tight where you are, because it's easier to get that step up into the bigger role than make a sideways move out of it into a bigger company to go up. But obviously that's not always the case. And looking at some of the moves you've made, you have moved and had a promotion or sort of moved into a bigger role. So
yeah.
But I know when we've spoken in the past, you've always been open with your team, sort of saying, hey, look, there is a bit of a ceiling here for you. So now it feels like it could be the right time to move on. And you've always been really proud of the fact that you've sort of grown and developed great people, and you almost get a buzz out of seeing them leave your team, leave the business into something bigger and better. But I guess what's your views kind of around that?
I think personally we should all, I think in the modern world, I would expect on average an engineer to do 2 to 3 years somewhere. I would always encourage, not all the time, of course, not my own team, but I would always encourage, I think that first maybe 10 years of your engineering career, I think you should look to say, look, I'm going to work somewhere for 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, then I'm going to look for another opportunity. It might be a sideways move, it might be a slight upwards move. In 2 to 3 years, you're going to learn most of what you're going to take from that company. You're going to learn their systems, you're going to learn their approaches, patterns, technology, dynamics, and ways of working. And I think particularly if you're quite ambitious and you do want to climb your way up a ladder eventually, it's important to have lots of different experience to lean upon, to see how things have worked in one company and how they didn't work in another, and be able to kind of take a step back and reflect, well, that worked really well here, but it didn't work there. And why was that? Was it team dynamics, personalities, stakeholders? There's a whole load of different kind of inputs that affect that stuff. But yeah, I think that is probably the most important thing for me.
No, that makes sense. And again, look, I might be blowing my leg off, Jason, asking you this question, but in terms of, and I think it'd be really interesting for people to hear, in terms of kind of getting that next role, hearing of that next opportunity, I suppose how, as you move up through the ranks and as you want to go from a developer to a senior developer to tech, to whatever the different roles are, what's your view on how you go about sort of building those networks, getting in and hearing about those opportunities? And like you said, a lot of it for those places is right place at the right time.
Yeah.
How have you done that, and what's your advice to people who are sort of thinking about what you've said but unsure on how to approach it?
So I think if progression is something that's very important to you, and it should be to most people, not necessarily everyone. And I think there is there is no downside to saying, I'm happy as a senior engineer. I like my job. I'm happy where I am. I'm happy with that kind of ratio between, if you call it responsibility / stress and remuneration. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's great.
Yeah.
The best advice I could say is to join a small company. I know a lot of logic would say, you join the big corporate because they have all the training plans and all those kind of things. You cannot replace real life experience. And in a smaller organization, you will inevitably wear far more hats than you will do in a big corporate. You'll be exposed to a lot more detail than you would do in a large organization. You may find yourself logging onto Azure one day trying to fix a problem with an app service that in a big organization you'd never be allowed anywhere near. I think a young growing company will help fast track your career because the amount of exposure you get within that organization. Some of the good examples I can think of, particularly from my time at Bud, we had a junior engineer doing some of the massive upgrades of one of the core platforms our system was based on, over Christmas. Because he didn't have any holiday left or something. I can't remember. But again, it's the level of trust and the opportunity that he got to do that again you probably wouldn't have naturally got in a larger, more kind of regimented company. So I would definitely say, look, you want a bit of both. It's good to go to a large organization. It's good to go to a small organization, somewhere in the middle. Kind of feel out different companies, different cultures, and work out what suits you best. Personally, I'd say I enjoy a young but scaling company that's still got problems to solve, and to me that's interesting. I'm less inclined to go to somewhere that's very established and it's like, go in, here's your sheet, this is your job, and you just go 1, 2, 3, 4. These are my roles and responsibilities. I quite enjoy somewhere where there's a bit of breadth to it, and it's actually just about delivering outcomes, not about following a kind of roles and not my job kind of mentality. But obviously, if something goes wrong, it's not my job.
Yeah, well, clearly, pass that buck.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing, and again, I suppose, look, my view on it is, hey, speak to a great recruiter, and we'll always find you the great opportunity. But I think, look, from your view, how have you got some of these roles, and again, somebody, because the problem is, look, we all know us recruiters come with a certain reputation, and software engineers probably aren't always very keen at speaking with us because, again, some of them don't have great experiences. So how have you done it? How have you kind of built that network, and sort of, I suppose, how have you moved roles? And again, what kind of different avenues would you sort of say to people to look at, and how to, because you've got all these cool meetups that happen in and around the city. I mean, is that, I don't know, what's your view on the value you place on all of that stuff?
It's I think meetups are definitely worthwhile attending, whether remotely or in person. And that's not just for kind of networking per se, but it's about expanding your knowledge. Listening to people, understanding their experiences. I know it's probably a bit stereotypical, but most of the meetups I've attended in person, I wouldn't say have been fantastic networking opportunities, because it's kind of, everyone stands around with their mate, eats some pizza, talks with a couple of other guys or girls they may know, and then sits down and listens to someone else talk, and then wanders off into the darkness. But I think, look, connecting people on LinkedIn is a good start. Build a network that way. Search out recruiters, look through job opportunities, see who's posting them. Talk to agencies such as yourself. But there's never any harm in benchmarking where you are now. It kind of have a chat with a recruiter, someone who knows the industry, knows what kind of opportunities are out there. And even if you're not ready now, I think there's kind of different states we go through. There is completely closed, which is, I'm not at all interested in a new job. I'm completely 100% happy where I am. I'm not even entertaining discussions. And then there is that sort of passive stage where you start to pay a bit more interest to those emails that get sent through from wonderful recruiters such as yourself. Hey, insert name here. Of course, yours are all personally handwritten.
Right answer, Jason.
Yeah. And then through to kind of almost like an active state where you're right now, I'm looking for a new job. And dare I quote my mum, but her view is the moment you update your CV, you're gone. It's just a matter of time.
I like that. I'm going to steal that from your mum. I think that's my tagline.
Yeah. So go for that. There is royalties to pay every time you use that quote, but by all means, it's. I think building up a network, you will inevitably. I mean, in fact, the role I'm in now, there was a post put on LinkedIn by a recruiter. It piqued my interest. I was at kind of a passive state in that I was considering, thinking about whether I want to move on. You see a role, you think, that sounds interesting. I'll give them a quick call or drop them a message, find out a bit more for it, and then you think this sounds really interesting actually, and then you go through the recruitment process, and if you're fortunate enough, you end up with a new job. So yeah, I would say build a network with recruiters. If you do get the opportunity to meet other people, it's well worth doing. And stay in touch with your old colleagues. Bristol, and I think every community or software engineering community, it is a small world, and you'll quite often end up bumping into people that you've worked with in the past, and they can be a good avenue for you to get into new roles. If you know someone, they work somewhere you're interested in, you can touch base with them. They can give you the sort of the inside track on what roles are coming up, and potentially put in a good word for you, which again can help your success in that role.
And I think you're right. The bit you said, the Bristol software engineering market and the Southwest is it's a well-connected small world. So yeah, like you said, it can be a great thing, but also just tread carefully sometimes with how you leave a business and how you behave. So just it's an interesting one, but that's good. All right, final things then. So two best tips then. What would your top tip be for someone who's wanting to be a software engineer and is sat right at the start of their career, or sat there going, look, I'd love to be one, and I think what would that top piece of advice be?
I think my top piece of advice would be, I think with any career, pare back to what it is that you enjoy. What gives you satisfaction. A lot of software engineering is about solving problems, completing things, finishing things. And I think if that's where you get real satisfaction, you'll go through that sort of journey of I've been smashing my head against this for 2 days and I'm not getting anywhere, and there's a famous load of kind of memes that float around the software world of, I've got no idea what I'm doing, so I'm a complete god, and we all go through that journey on a day-to-day basis, and particularly kind of imposter syndrome is rife throughout through the industry, and that's fine. Accept it. You won't know everything, and that person who you think knows everything doesn't know everything. All they probably do know is what they don't know. That's all they've managed to progress in that 5 years. So, rest assured that we've all got constantly new things to learn. But I'd say the first step, is to understand what is it that I'm looking for in a role, what gives me satisfaction. Then I think the most important thing really, if you decide, software engineering has the right things that I know are going to make me happy. Like anything, you're not going to have 7 days a week are not going to be fantastic days. You're still going to have the odd bad day here and there. But the majority of them should give you satisfaction. Throw yourself into it, absorb knowledge left, right, and center, read, play around in the evenings in your own time. Those are things that differentiate an engineer who sort of sits there as a midweight developer 5 years later to that engineer who is a senior engineer at 26, 27 in a kind of well-known tech company. They are immensely passionate about software engineering, and all they want to do is build stuff, play with technology. You cannot replace playing around and building stuff with a bit of reading or listening to someone else talk. That first-hand experience is really important. And that'd be my advice.
Good advice. And then the final one is someone who sat there 3-4 years experience, who's really career motivated, who wants to get to sort of the head of development, senior tech manager. What sort of career advice would you offer them?
So I think there's, to everyone I'd say, look, you want to know your craft. So get yourself to be an accomplished senior engineer. That's the first step really. You can have your eye on where you want to go after that, But I think it's important to understand the sort of problems that maybe the more senior engineers look at, the breadth of knowledge that they try to have, and then really I think beyond there, it's accepting a slight step change in your role. Your role is no longer to be the best engineer, and you have to accept that. And I can say from firsthand, and I think a lot of other people, you go through this slight identity crisis. I was what I created, and all of a sudden I don't really create anything myself. Therefore, do I have a purpose anymore? But your role is less now about what you individually contribute. It's more about the environment and how you enable others to contribute, others to grow. You unblock things for them, you shield them from stuff that will impact their ability to deliver. And I think more than anything, you start to accept accountability and responsibility for the bigger outcomes. As you get into a more senior role, you can't really take the stance of, well, I tried my best. You ultimately you're accountable for the outcome. We've got a team of 6 people, maybe multiple teams working on something. It's on me to make sure that that is successful. And I think that comes with lifting yourself up slightly away from the technology. It's very easy as an engineer to get sort of really absorbed into low-level detail, because that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. And it can be difficult to do it, but you need to lift yourself away from it and really focus yourself on what value am I adding to the business. As engineers, we're value creators. We create value for a business, whether that be a product business, a project business, or elsewhere. And it's always being able to put that kind of critical eye on it and say, am I over-engineering this? Am I under-engineering this? Am I focused too much on the technology and the use of technology being the end as opposed to the means to achieving an end? So I think it's shifting away from, maybe not so much code and technology, but focusing on what's the business outcome that we are helping achieve. I think if you can do that, that's probably one of the key things to taking that next step.
Great advice. Thank you. Anything else you want to add that we haven't covered off? I think we've got most of it nailed down.
Just, don't deal with recruiters. It's a nightmare.
Apart from Carl.
Edit out that one. Yeah.
Amazing.
Apart from Carl, of course, yeah. I think the most important thing, I probably, reiterated it a few times, but the most important thing for me is attitude, behavior, and personality. Software engineering is a team exercise. It's how you interact with the product team. It's how you interact with your other engineers, your testers, depending on how your organization is set out. At Clearbank, we sort of follow what's called a team topologies model. Mm-hmm. So, we have the company's kind of organized into clusters. Each cluster generally looks after sort of a product range. There's a UK payments cluster, there's an operational excellence cluster, and there is a international cluster that I look after. And then beneath that, you organize into hives, so groups of teams, with looking after certain domains, so faster payments, for example, or foreign currency exchange, whatever it might be. But as a part of that, as an engineer, you're going to work with business analysts, you're going to work with product owners, you're going to work with software development engineers and test, you're going to work with senior tech managers, team leads, subject matter experts. There's a whole range of people that you will work with on a day-to-day basis, and it's being open to that, and not just your role is not just to sit there with tunnel vision on a computer. Or perhaps if it is, if you're working remotely, but recognizing that your role is actually about how you interact with those people, and it's those interactions that really drive the value for the business. Not here's a spec, go and deliver this. Challenge it, ask questions, and that will help you as an engineer deliver the most appropriate solution. And I think it comes onto the organization to ensure at the same time that they have the right things in place to help feed information and context into that engineering team, so they can be, make informed decisions, not just, well, I think this, therefore I'll do that.
Good advice.
And come on, work.
Brilliant. Yeah. Good plug. I'll get that one in there. But look, I appreciate that, Jason. I think that's really good, and I think lots of people will find lots of value across that from both ends of the spectrum, really. So thank you for giving up your time on a Tuesday evening in the boiling hot sun to do it.
Should I be doing some sort of, please like and subscribe thing for you?
Yeah. Follow People Talent, follow Carl, and give them all your jobs. That's all you need to say, mate. That'll be fine.
But no, look, it's a great career to go into. My choice to move into software was by far one of the best decisions I've made. And there's a certain irony that I made a lot of decisions early on in my career based on how much money I thought I would earn. And now I've sort of transferred to think more about, well, how much will I enjoy that job, and as a side effect of that, I earn a decent living, but it's not my primary purpose, and I think that's the
And
key.
I think that's the important thing, isn't it? Is you've got to do what you enjoy, and if you do what you enjoy, all of the the rewards of that follow very nicely along behind, because you do well, and success becomes following, doesn't it? Really. So that's
Absolutely.
good.
Absolutely.
Good. All right. Thank you, Jason.